Welcome to Ohio Roots, the official podcast of the Ohio Genealogical Society. Join us as we embark on a captivating journey through Ohio's rich genealogy, history, and abundant resources. Hosted by me, OGS Executive Director Noel Poirier, this podcast brings you insightful conversations with a diverse array of guests, from OGS members, chapter leaders, and staff to renowned genealogists, historians, and influential figures within the genealogical community. Each episode delves into fascinating topics and captivating stories. So grab your headphones, hit that play button, and join us on this enthralling journey of Ohio's roots. Discover your roots and light up your genealogy. Join us for the Ohio Genealogical Society's annual conference, April 30th through May 3rd, 2025, at the beautiful Kalahari Resort in Sandusky, Ohio. Learn from top genealogy experts, explore groundbreaking research techniques, and connect with fellow family history enthusiasts. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned pro, this is the must-attend event for discovering your story. Visit OGS.org to register today. That's OGS.org. Let's light up your family history together. OGS, connecting families, past and present. My guest on this episode of the OGS Ohio Roots podcast is Denyse Allen. Denise is one of the many talented speakers that are lined up for the 2025 OGS Conference being held at the end of April in Sandusky, Ohio. Denise operates the website paancestors.com and specializes in Pennsylvania genealogy, my home state. I'm looking forward to hearing about her presentations at the conference, and I hope you enjoy my chat today with Denyse Allen. Well, I want to welcome Denyse Allen to the Ohio Roots podcast. Denise, thank you so much for joining me from my home county of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. No one in Ohio knows how to say Lancaster. They all say Lancaster. So it's nice to be able to talk to somebody who can pronounce the word properly.
Well, I'm glad I could at least hit that bar to start with. Yeah, it is one of the telling signs, along with being able to say Schuylkill.
Oh, yeah, Schuylkill. Yeah, that's another one.
There's another one. You know, I originally grew up in Conshohocken, which isn't too bad of a name to say, but
trying to explain to my kids what it was like to drive in the Schuylkill Expressway in the 80s and 90s is a bit difficult.
Yeah. There's just certain things about when you live in Pennsylvania, you know, you definitely, and every state has their little quirks and cultures, but
of course.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it.
It's really our pleasure. We, as you know, we're trying to interview as many of our guest speakers for the 2025 OGS conference in Kalahari, to kind of give folks and our listeners a preview of what to expect when they go to the conference this year. But before we get into that, I'm going to ask you a question I ask all of our guests first, because one of the things I found most interesting in speaking to genealogists, and I get a chance to talk to a lot of them, obviously, as you do, is learning what got them interested in the first place. You know, some of those stories are really interesting. And so I'm going to ask you yours. How did you get into genealogy?
How did I get into genealogy? That's a great question. My dad's father worked in a dairy, and when his father died when he was 10. So, and the dairy went out of business soon thereafter. So this was in 1950. Okay. And my dad, even though he grew up in this small town of Conshohocken, he never knew where his family came from. Right. And my mom didn't know either. We were just Americans, right? Like we were just these people that, and we grew up around people that were later immigrants. You know, they came from Poland or they came from Italy and worked in the factories around Conshohocken. All those are gone now, of course. But, so a lot of the kids I grew up with all knew where they were from, right? They were first generation or second generation Americans and everything. And, so that was always in the back of my mind. But my dad and I one time went to the National Archives back in the day when it was just microfilm readers. And we went through the census. And there was something about that, that pursuit, that search in that moment that was, it always stuck with me. And, what got me into it, with a passion now is, my kids graduated from high school. I was looking for what's my next act in life, like I did the act as, mom and everything. So what's next for me? And I was like, I really want to do the genealogy thing. And like, this is something cool. I never know what I'm going to find in my past, And it's been fun, and it ends up most of my family, as I've researched them, landed in Pennsylvania, stayed in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
They this
Right.
is like I have all Pennsylvania roots, like every single
Okay.
line. So it's fun. It's really
Yeah.
fun.
I think it's another, we talk about generational things, and it's hard to describe to my son, who's a teenager now, the what I used to call microfilm nausea, which is when you're spinning that microfilm around and around and around, going real fast, then you stop. And then you get that wonderful pit in your stomach, which is something our children will never, unfortunately, understand. Oh, well. Pennsylvania, because I'm a native Pennsylvanian, obviously. My family is from Pennsylvania. Well, I should say New Jersey / Pennsylvania. They lived in the Trenton, and then on the other side of the river in Morrisville, I think it was, and in those areas, Yardley, and those areas of Pennsylvania a long time ago. But what makes it for you? You're coming out here to Ohio, and of course, Ohio is one of those transit states. So a lot of people came from Pennsylvania, stayed in Ohio, or transited through Ohio elsewhere. But what is it that you think makes doing genealogy research in Pennsylvania unique or special?
Well, the big thing I think a lot of people miss is how important our county records are. So I think and I think this too in Ohio, when you do early Ohio research, it's the same thing. But in Pennsylvania, because we've got another, 100 years on you or something from Ohio, you really have to get into the county records, and you really have to immerse yourself in that world, whatever the time period is that your ancestors lived in Pennsylvania. You've got to really get in there and know all the ethnicities, know all of the local newspapers, and it's not online. And people are like, "It's online." I'm like, "It's not." It's really not. I wish it all was, but it is getting there. Hopefully, thanks to Family Search, and it is possible to get a lot of the indexes, and don't leave out our local people here that run all these little local societies.
Sure.
They know all the ins and outs of the big events and the things that happened and who worked where and what churches were big and, who went to what church. And those people are still there. They haven't left that county, and they can go back, 6 or 7 generations and really help you. So I think that's it. We are still a very small town state. And, if you look at news from Pennsylvania, you get news from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia or Harrisburg or Penn State or, whatever. And it's like, that's not us.
Right.
There's still, that's like, 10% of the state lives in those areas. And people don't realize that. They think, most of the state lives in these big metropolitan areas. And we don't. Most of the state is very rural.
I think your point, too, about going to those local societies or organizations in the community is a good one. And I'm selfishly promoting it as well, because in Ohio, the Ohio Genealogical Society is made up of over 80 chapters all across the state. And one of the first things I do when I get a phone call from somebody asking about their Ohio ancestor getting started is find out, well, what county are you looking at? And then I will direct them immediately to whichever OGS county chapter is going to be able to help them. Because like you said, the reality is those people know the county, they know the spots, they know the sites, they know where the records are, they know where the bodies are buried, and literally, and that's a really good thing. And I noticed in looking at the schedule for the 2025 OGS conference, you got I think 3 programs you're giving for the conference this year. And I don't want to give them away, but you kind of mentioned a little bit of the importance of that, which is you're doing one on a tour of county courthouses. So looking for Pennsylvania ancestors, what should people expect from that particular talk?
Well, we're going to run through all the types of records that were made in the county and today and were made in the past. So there's a few that we stopped doing, but generally it's the same similar records. So what we called them here versus in Ohio or other states, and then what's online and what isn't. So, like I sort of teased, the indexes are sometimes online, so people will find orphans court indexes on Family Search, and they'll be like, oh, I found, like, what is it? So we'll talk about what the orphans court is and why you want to look that record up. And it is at the courthouse. So a lot of our things haven't been completely microfilmed by Family Search,
Sure.
Some of it has.
As much as they'd like to.
So,
So give me an example. If somebody sees a name in a Pennsylvania County Orphan Records Index, what would they anticipate finding, if anything, in the actual record itself?
Well, the orphans court, it could be a bunch of things. So the orphans court doesn't deal just with orphans.
Right.
They do a little bit, but they do civil cases that don't fit into, sort of the normal court cases. So it's things that are odd. So the most recent example that people might remember is because it was in the news when the Barnes Foundation, which was in Montgomery County, moved their collection to Philadelphia. It was in the Philadelphia Orphans Court the whole hearing. So people were like, what is it doing? An art collection in the Orphans Court, right? But it involved an estate. So most often the record you're going to find is intestate estate filings in the Orphans Court, or regular estates that went through regular probate and there was some sort of issue in the probate process. So they'll kick it over to the orphans court to get it settled out. So those records you really want, and they're not microfilmed and they're not online. Digitized.
And it gets to your important point of knowing what that record even means, right? Right. Which is pretty vital if you're not familiar with what that record would actually mean for them.
If you've got ancestors in the orphans court records, that's juicy stuff. You want to go after it. And I think people, and because it's not explained in any of the records, like with any context, then people don't know.
If you enjoy listening to the Ohio Roots podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could go to whatever platform it is that you listen and give us a good review. Reviews help us get more listeners and reach more people with Ohio Roots and what we're trying to do with the Ohio Genealogical Society. So please leave us a nice review, and thanks for listening. Now, another program I know you're going to be offering is one on vital records from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Now, is there to me, the term vital records is a fairly straightforward term. But am I incorrect?
Are you incorrect?
Yeah.
Oh, no, it is a straightforward term.
Okay.
I mean, birth, marriage, and death are the statistics around vital records. Now, I throw in divorce because it is collected as a vital record stat. It was a statistic by the CDC and the state. And I also cover some unusual vital records that we have. Every state had them. So delayed birth certificates.
Okay, sure.
They're great. And people aren't sure, like, why does it say 1941 to 1976? Like, that's weird. I thought we could only get the older ones. And so I answer all those questions and again, explain how to find them. And some of those are online and searchable, but most aren't.
Well, and again, that's we talk about. I know I say we, the general we, the royal we, when it comes to genealogy, we'll talk forever about the fact that not everything is online.
Yeah.
And I know when I go to the local public library and help there, or when I speak with folks at the Roundhouse, or not the Roundhouse, at the library about doing their genealogical research, and they just want to look on the computer.
Yeah, I do too.
And I would with them. That would be great, wouldn't it? But then the reality is, one of the joys of the Samuel D. Isley Library, the OGS Library, is the fact that we have so many other records that are available, and we try to make sure they understand that those things are out there. So, the constant almost harping in a way that we do about don't just look online. You got to get there. There's foot traffic involved. You got to get out. Now, the interesting title I thought for one of your other talks was 4 records you can find in archives to kind of illuminate your Pennsylvania family.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite. Yes.
And it looked really interesting to me because I have Pennsylvania family, and without detailing all of that, because I want people to make sure they go to your talk. But are all those 4 records they're going to have to physically go somewhere and look for, or do you think they can find them elsewhere?
Some are digitized and online. So there are some, one of the things I talk about is personal letters that were sent between family members. Sure. And some of those have been digitized. And what's interesting about them is, I know this, I say this and people are like, oh, duh, of course. So this is, what are people talking about in letters?
Yeah.
Just think about it. What are people talking about in letters?
If they're like me, generally boring day-to-day things that they're doing in their lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But everybody around them, it's like the Facebook of their time, right? They're like, did you like, they're like, so like, so there's cases in these letters, and I showed in my talk, of like vital events, right? Birth, marriages,
Sure.
and deaths that occurred in the community. And they're talking about it in the letter. So, and it's in like 1840. It's the best death record you're going to get. If you had an ancestor in that community. And it doesn't, not necessarily related to the people in the letters, right? Like it's just, it's gossip essentially. And it's in these letters. So those letters, if you do archival research, it's tricky a little bit. You got to know, like, again, where your ancestor lived, the town and the time period, and then search archive catalogs with that information. It's usually in the metadata there in the catalogs. But you could find letters of people writing to other family members, gossiping about your ancestor. I mean, how awesome is that? Like, I'll take it.
It's funny. It reminds me, when I asked you about what got you interested in genealogy in the first place, what got me interested in genealogy in the first place was a book of poetry that was given to me that was written by my third great grandfather. And no one knew anything about him other than his name. And so, as a historian, my academic background is in history. I have a master's in military history and a bachelor's in American. And I was interested as a historical question. But in his poetry, he did exactly what you're talking about. He writes about a guy named Bill Simmons who was trying to get this woman who was a widow to marry him. And his poems are hilarious, and he's writing about it. And like you, and with your recommendation, the same recommendation, I was in the basement of the Northumberland County, Virginia Historical Society going through 1880 microfilm. And there he was with his family. And right down the sheet from him was Bill Simmons, his neighbor, the wheelwright. So I hear you.
That is fantastic. I love it.
Talk about gossip. I mean, it was the best. I love it. I love it. What's another record?
Yeah, well, and I love your example because it brings them to life and makes them human, right?
Exactly.
Like they're not just this data point, that you're trying to understand, like, who are these people?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I wonder in your example too, if there's some teasing going on.
Oh, I have no doubt.
This poem about this.
I have no doubt.
Like, anyway,
it's a great, what's funny is I donated the original book of poetry to the College William Mary archives because he lived in Northumberland County in the 1870s and 1880s. And there's 80 poems in the book. And there are countless people mentioned in the book from the neighborhood. And when I was talking to the little old ladies in the basement of the Northumberland County Historical Society, they could tell me exactly where his house was, exactly where this farm was. And it reinforced all the things you already said, which is that the people in the community know where everything is. And who the people were, and might have been related to some of them. And then the resource, and I've done a talk on this particular resource for OGS because I call it an unlikely genealogical source. You wouldn't expect to find a lot of genealogy in my great-grandfather's book of poetry, but it's there. So I love that. I just love that concept, and I love the storytelling of it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you had asked me one other record. So I'll share this one because I'm not sure if this is possible in Ohio or not, but it's possible in Pennsylvania. We had state hospitals, mental institutions that ran in the state. Obviously, every state had them. The peak population was in 1950, and it declined pretty steeply after that until they were almost all shuttered in like 1986-ish.
Right.
Those records are public records of the patients that were there 75 years after the record was created. So the whole HIPAA, everyone gets like, oh, what about HIPAA? Well, one, HIPAA expires when you're dead. You're not
funny how that works.
You don't have a right to your records once you're dead. You have no rights to anything. And there's a lot of interesting legal arguments about that. But also, the state chose to close them just following HIPAA law, which is 75 years. So, 75 years. So the records you can request from the Pennsylvania State Archive. So if anyone listening to this wants to do that, you cannot go to the archive and have them hand you these records. You must request them through a research request by mail. And there is a small charge for them. However, if you have an ancestor that was institutionalized, these things are a genealogical goldmine because the staff is there trying to figure out if the thing your ancestor was institutionalized for was hereditary.
Right.
So they're taking in a full case study and interviewing family members, the patient himself or herself, and asking, well, who's your father? Where did they come from? What job did they do? What about your mother? What about your brothers and sisters? What about your cousins? What about your grandfather? So, the longer they're institutionalized, the more those interviews are conducted.
Good for you, bad for them, probably.
Oh, there was a woman I worked with, shout out to Sarah. She was really stuck on a brick wall and reached out to the Pennsylvania State Archives for these records. She had an ancestor that was institutionalized like most of his adult life because he had a mental disability. And she got back the entire family tree going back like 5 generations.
Holy cow.
In these records. I mean, full detail, every place they lived, every job they had, every possible health condition this family had, the home country they came from, the county they came from in Ireland,
That's
it
amazing.
was all in here. And he was institutionalized, in the 1800s, like the late 1800s into the 20th century. So don't, discount like, oh, well, I'm never going to figure out, from a record in 1930 where this family came from in 1810. Well, you just might because you don't know. And if nothing else, you get this really deep, rich contextual bit around what the family was going through, who they were, and all that. So the state hospital records are just, and they're hit or miss. So
what's neat about that example you gave is that if nothing else too, it gives you at least a starting point of where to look for other official records you might want or feel like you need to have to prove something you want to prove. And I think that's really really neat. You have a website called paancestors.com. I typed it in wrong twice because I forgot the second A. But it's okay. Talk to me a little bit about what the website is there for and what people can find there.
Oh, great. So I'm making a note to myself to buy the domain that has the typo.
Good note. Go right ahead.
When you own a business, you're like, what are all the possible misspellings of this?
Well,
so people can
whoever's out there and owns pancestors.com, that's where I went a couple times. So
okay, that's funny. I hope people don't mind a little behind baseball or whatever.
That's okay. That's okay.
But the website is centered around people who are interested in doing their own research and need some guidance. So it's kind of the spot between like they've done it themselves using everything available online and Facebook groups and attending the webinars they can get to. And the person that wants, on the other end of the spectrum that's hiring a professional genealogist to do all the research for them. So they need something in between. So this is what that is. And people can join the site for a one-time membership fee. They get all my back content, all my things that I've researched, all my books that I've published. They get videos explaining where things are. They get access to me. They can ask me as many questions as they want. We've done some in-person research trips to archives where I'll go with them and we'll research in person, which is fun. And I do occasional webinars with them. So it's not like set like, the second Tuesday of every month. Like I schedule them as, makes sense and things are hot or not, in the genealogy community. People are like, you're talking about dead people, how like urgent could it be? I'm like, you don't understand. Like things come out. Like, and it's
as you know, as well as I do, it's changing fast too.
It's
with
amazing.
generative with AI and with DNA. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, Denyse Allen, thank you so much for joining me today on the Ohio Roots podcast. I appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule and kind of giving us a peek at what we're going to hear from you at the 2025 OGS Conference in Kalahari. I'm looking forward to hearing you speak, and thanks again for being here.
Thank you again for having me. I am looking forward to seeing everyone at OGS. It's going to be fun.
It is. It's a great conference. We always enjoy ourselves, and I'm glad you're taking part.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Ready to light up your genealogy? Mark your calendars for the Ohio Genealogical Society's annual conference happening April 30th to May 3rd, 2025 at Kalahari Resorts in Sandusky, Ohio. Immerse yourself in inspiring workshops, expert-led sessions, and exciting discoveries that will help you uncover your family's history. Plus, enjoy the perfect blend of learning and relaxation at one of Ohio's favorite destinations. Don't miss out. Visit ogs.org to learn more and to register. That's ogs.org. Come, connect, learn, and ignite your family story. Well, that was just a great chat with Denise. I am really looking forward to kind of listening in on some of her presentations at the OGS conference later this spring, and particularly as someone from Pennsylvania, I really am looking forward to some of the talks that she's going to be giving. If you plan on attending, be sure to check out her programs as well. You can learn more about Denise at her website, paancestors.com, where there are a number of great resources on researching Pennsylvania genealogy. Thank you to Denise for joining me today, and thank you for listening to the OGS Ohio Roots podcast.
The Ohio Roots podcast is brought to you by the Ohio Genealogical Society, the premier gateway for discovering your Ohio family history. Hosted by OGS Executive Director Noel Poyer and edited by Luke Poyer. Theme song is Beautiful Ohio, recorded by Bob Stanley and his orchestra in 1944. To learn more about joining the Ohio Genealogical Society, visit www.ogs.org.